Part 1 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges, Part 1, March. In midmost length of 100-citied Crete, the land that cradled Zeus of old renown, where grave Demeter nurseried her wheat, and Minos fashioned law, ere he went down to judge the quaking hordes of hell's domain, there dwelt a king on the Omphalian plain, eastward of Ida, in a little town. 3 daughters had this king, of whom my tale time hath preserved, that loveth to despise the wealth which men misdeem of much avail. Their glories for themselves that they devise, for clerkly is he, old hard-featured Time, and poet's fabled song, and lover's rhyme he storeth on his shelves to please his eyes. These 3 princesses all were fairest fair, and of the elder twain 'tis truth to say, that if they stood not high above compare, yet in their prime they bore the palm away, outwards of loveliness. But nature's mood, gracious to make, had grudgingly endued, and marr'd by gifting ill the beauteous clay. And being in honour they were well content, to feed on lovers' looks and courtly smiles, to hang their necks with jewelled ornament and gold, that vanity in vain beguiles, and live in gaze, and take their praise for due, to be the fairest maidens then to view within the shores of Greece and all her isles. What of that youngest one, the 3rd princess, there is no likeness, since she was as far from pictured beauty as is ugliness, though on the side where heavenly wonders are, ideals out of being and above, which music worshippeth. But if love love, 'tis as the poet saith, to love a star. Her vision rather drave from passion's heart what earthly soil it had afore possessed, since to man's purer unsubstantial part the brightness of her presence was addressed. And such as mocked at God when once they saw her heavenly glance were humbled, and in awe of things unseen returned to praise the best. And so before her, wheresoever she went, hushing the crowd, a thrilling whisper ran, and silent heads were reverently bent, till from the people the belief began that love's own mother had come down on earth, sweet Cytherea, or of mortal birth a greater goddess was vouchsafed to man. Then Aphrodite's statue in its place stood without worshippers. If Cretans prayed for beauty, or for children, love, or grace, the prayer and vow were offered to the maid. Unto the maid their hymns of praise were sung, their victims bled for her they hung garland and golden gift, and none forbade. And thence opinion spread beyond the shores, from isle to isle the wander flew. It came across the Aegean on 1,000 oars, Athens and Smyrna caught the Virgin's fame, and east or west, wherever the tale had been, the adoration of the foam-born queen fell to neglect, and men forgot her name. No longer to high Paphos now 'twas sail'd, the fragrant altar by the Graces served at Cnidus was forsaken, pilgrims fail'd, the rocky island to her name reserved. Proud Ephyra and Meropis renown'd, 'twas all for Crete her votaries were bound, and to the Cretan maid her worship swerved. Which when in heaven great Aphrodite saw, who is the breather of the year's bright morn, fount of desire and beauty without flaw, herself the life that doth the world adorn, seeing that without her generative might nothing can spring upon the shores of light, nor any bud of joy or love be born. She, when she saw the insult, did not hide her indignation, that a mortal frail with her eterne divinity had vied, her fair Hellenic empire to assail, for which she had fled the doom of Ninus old, and left her wanton images unsold in Babylon and Zidon soon to fail. Not long, she cried, shall that poor girl of Crete guard it in my despite, for I will bring such mischief on the sickly counterfeit, as soon shall cure her tribe of worshipping. Her beauty will I mock with loathed lust, bow down her dainty spirit to the dust, and leave her long alive to feel the sting. With that she calls to her comely boy, the limber scion of the god of war, the fruit adulterous, which for man's annoy to that fierce partner Cytherea bore, Eros the ever young, who only grew in mischief, and was Cupid named anew, in westering aftertime of Latin lore. When the first dawn of manhood is, the hour when beauty from its fleshly bud unpent flaunts like the coral of a summer flower, as if all life were for that ornament, such Eros seemed in years a trifler gay, the prodigal of an immortal day, for ever spending and yet never spent. His skin is brilliant with the nimble flood of ichor that comes dancing from his heart, lively as fire and redder than the blood, and maketh in his eyes small flashes dart, and curleth his hair golden, and distilleth honey on his tongue, and all his body filleth with wanton lightsomeness in every part. Naked he goeth, but with sprightly wings, red iridescent are his shoulders fledged, a bow his weapon which he deftly strings, and little arrows barbed and keenly edged, and these he shooteth true, but else the youth for all his seeming reeketh nought of truth, but most deceiveth where he most is pledged. 'Tis he that maketh in men's heart a strife between remorseful reason and desire, till with life lost they lose the love of life, and by their own hands wretchedly expire, or slain in bloody rivalries they miss even the short embracement of their bliss, his smile of fury and his kiss of fire. He makes the strong man weak, the weak man wild, ruins great business and purpose high, brings down the wise to folly reconciled, and martial captains on their knees to sigh. He changeth dynasties, and on the head of duteous heroes who for honour bled, smircheth the laurel that can never die. Him then she called, and gravely kissing told the great dishonour to her godhead done, and how if he from that in heaven would hold on earth he must maintain it as her son, the rather that his weapons were most fit, as was his skill ordained to champion it, and flattering thus his ready zeal she won. Whereon she quickly led him down on earth, and showed him Psyche, thus the maid was named, whom when she showed, but could not hide her worth, she grew with envy tenfold more inflamed. But if, she cried, thou smite her as I bid, soon shall our glory of this affront be rid, and she and all her likes for ever shamed. Make her to love the loathliest, basest wretch, deformed in body and of moonstruck mind, a hideous brute and vicious, born to fetch anger from dogs and cursing from the blind, and let her passion for the monster be as shameless and detestable as he is most extreme and vile of humankind. Which said, when he agreed, she spake no more, but left him to his task, and took her way beside the ripples of the shell-strewn shore, the southward stretching margin of a bay, whose sandy curves she passed, and taking stand upon its taper horn of furthest land, looked left and right to rise and set of day. Fair was the sight, for now, though full an hour the sun had sunk, she saw the evening light in shifting colour to the zenith tower, and grow more gorgeous ever and more bright. Bathed in the warm and comfortable glow, the fair delighted queen forgot her woe, and watch'd the unwonted pageant of the night. Broad and low down, where late the sun had been, a wealth of orange gold was thickly shed, fading above into a field of green, like apples ere they ripen into red. Then to the height of variable hue, of rose and pink and crimson freak'd with blue, and olive border'd clouds o'er lilac led. High in the opposed west the wandering moon, all silvery green in flying green, was fleeced, and round the blazing south the splendour soon caught all the heaven, and ran to north and east. And Aphrodite knew the thing was wrought by cunning of Poseidon, and she thought she would go see with whom he kept his feast. Swift to her wish came swimming on the waves his lovely ocean nymphs, her guides to be, the Nereids all, who live among the caves and valleys of the deep, Cymodocea, Agave, blue-eyed Halia, and Nerissa, Spiro and Thoe, Clossae and Actaea, Iara, Melite, and Amphinome, Apsudes and Nemeretes, Calianassa, Simathoe, Thalia, Limnoria, Clymene, Ionera, and Ionassa, Doris and Panope and Galatea, Dynamene, Dexamene and Myra, Pharusa, Doto, Proto, Calianira, Amphithoe, Orithua, and Amathea. And after them sad Melicertes drave his chariot, that with swift unfellied wheel, by his two dolphins drawn along the wave, flew as they plunged, yet did not dip nor reel, but like a plough that shears the heavy land, stood on the flood, and back on either hand overturned the briny furrow with its keel. Behind came Tritons, that their conches blew, green-bearded, tailed like fish, all sleek and stark, and hippocampi tamed, a bristly crew, the browsers of old Proteus' weedy park, whose chief Merman brought a shell for boat, and balancing its hollow fan afloat, pushed it to shore and bade the queen embark. And then the goddess stepp'd upon the shell, which took her weight, and others threw a train of soft silk over her, that unfurl'd to swell in sails at breath of flying Zephyrs twain. And all her way with foam in laughter strewn, with stir of music and of conches blown, was Aphrodite launched upon the main. End of part 1. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 2 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. Part 2. April. But fairest Psyche still in favour rose, nor knew the jealous power against her sworn, and more her beauty now surpassed her foes, since 'twas transfigured by the spirit forlorn, that writeth to the perfecting of grace immortal question in a mortal face, the vague desire whereunto man is born. Already in good time her sisters both, whose honest charms were never famed as hers, with princes of the isle had plighted troth, and gone to rule their foreign courtiers. But she, exalted evermore beyond their loveliness, made yet no lover fond, and gained but number to her worshippers. To joy in others' joy had been her lot, and now that that was gone, she wept to see how her transcendent beauty overshot the common aim of all felicity. For love she sighed, and had some peasant rude, for true love's sake in simple passion wooed, then Psyche had not scorned his wife to be. For what is beauty, if it doth not fire the loving answer of an eager soul? Since 'tis the native food of man's desire, and doth to good our varying world control, which, when it was not, was for beauty's sake, desired and made by love, who still doth make a beauteous path thereon to beauty's goal. Should all men by some hateful venom die, the pity were that over the unpeopled sphere the sun would still bedeck the evening sky, and the unimaginable hues appear, with none to mark the rose and gold and green, that spring should walk the earth, and nothing seen of her fresh delicacy year by year. And if some beauteous things, whose heavenly worth and function overpass our mortal sense, lie waste and unregarded on the earth by reason of our gross intelligence, these are not vain, because in nature's scheme it lives that we shall grow from dream to dream, in time to gather an enchantment thence. Even as we see the fairest works of men a while neglected, and the makers die, but truth comes weeping to their graves, and then their fames victoriously mounting high do battle with the regnant names of eld, to win their seats, as when the gods rebelled against their sires and drave them from the sky. But to be praised for beauty and denied the meed of beauty, this was yet unknown. The best and bravest men have ever vied to win the fairest women for their own. Thus Psyche spake, or reasoned in her mind, disconsolate, and with self-pity pined, in the deserted halls, wandering alone. And grieved grew the king to see her woe, and blaming first the gods for her disease, who purposed to their oracle to go, to question how he might their wrath appease, or if that might not be the worst to hear, which is the last poor hope of them that fear. So he took his ship upon the northern seas, and journeying to the shrine of Delphi went, the temple of Apollo Pythian, where when the god he questioned if 'twas meant that Psyche should be wed, and to what man the tripod shook, and over the vaporous well the chanting Pythoness gave oracle, and thus in priestly verse the sentence ran: High on the topmost rock with funeral feast convey and leave the maid, nor look to find a mortal husband, but a savage beast, the viperous scourge of gods and humankind, who shames and vexes all. And as he flies with sword and fire, Zeus trembles in the skies, and groans arise from souls to hell consigned. With which reply the king returned full sad. For though he nothing more might understand, yet in the bitter bidding that he had, no man made question of the plain command, that he must sacrifice the tender flower of his own blood to a demonian power, upon the rocky mount with his own hand. Some said that she to Talos was devote, the metal giant, who with mile-long stride covered the isle, walking around by rote thrice every day at his appointed tide, who shepherded the sea-goats on the coast, and as he passed caught up and live would roast, pressing them to his burning ribs and side. Whose head was made of fine gold-beaten work, of silver pure his arms and gleaming chest, thence of green bloomed bronze far as the fork, of iron weather rusted all the rest. One single vein he had, which running down from head to foot was open in his crown, and closed by a nail, such was this pest. A little while they spent in sad delay, then ordered as the oracle had said, the cold feast and funeral display, wherewith the fated bridal should be sped. And their black pageantry and vain despairing, when Psyche saw and for herself preparing the hopeless ceremonial of the dead. Then spake she to the king and said, O sire, why wilt thou veil those venerable eyes with piteous tears, which must of me require more tears again than for myself arise? Then on the day my beauty first overstept its mortal place, it had been well to have wept, but now the fault beyond our ruing lies. As to be worshipped was my whole undoing, so my submission must the forfeit pay, and welcome were the morning of my wooing, though after it should dawn no other day. Up to the mountain! For I hear the voice of my beloved on the winds. Rejoice, arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. With such distempered speech that little cheer'd her mourning house, she went to choose with care the raiment for her day of wedlock weird, her body as for burial to prepare, but laved with bridal water from the stream where Hera bathed, for still her fate supreme was doubtful, whether love or death it were. Love that is made of joy, and death of fear. Nay, but not these held Psyche in suspense. Hers was the hope that, following by the bier, boweth its head beneath the dark immense. Her fear the dread of life, that turns to hide its tragic tears, what hour the happy bride ventures for love her maiden innocence. They set on high upon the bridal wain her bed for bier, and yet no corpse thereon, but like as when unto a warrior slain, and not brought home, the ceremonies done, are empty, for afar his body brave lies lost, deep buried by the wandering wave, or 'neath the foes his fury fell upon. So was her hearse, and with it went afore, singing the solemn dirge that moves to tears the singers, and behind, clad as for war, the king uncrown'd among his mournful peers, all 'neath their armour robed in linen white, and in their left were shields, and in their right torches they bore aloft instead of spears. And next the virgin tribe in white forth sail'd, with wreaths of dittany, and midst them there went Psyche, all in lily whiteness veil'd, the white quince blossom chapleting her hair. And last the common folk, a weeping crowd, far as the city gates with wailings loud, follow'd the sad procession in despair. Thus forth and up the mount they went, until the funeral chariot must be left behind, since road was none for steepness of the hill, and slowly by the narrow path they wind. All afternoon their white and scatter'd file toil'd on distinct, ascending many a mile over the long brown slopes and crags unkind. But ever unto the snowy peak there came of that storm-shapen pyramid so high 'twas evening, and with footsteps slow and lame they gathered up their lagging company. And then her sire, even as Apollo bade, set on the topmost rock the hapless maid, with trembling hands and melancholy cry. And now the sun was sunk, only the peak flashed like a jewel in the deepening blue, and from the shade beneath none dared to speak, but all looked up where glorified anew Psyche sat islanded in living day. Breathless they watched her, till the last red ray fled from her lifted arm that waved adieu. There left they her, turning with sad farewells to haste their homeward course as best they might. But night was crowding up the barren fells, and hid full soon their rocky path from sight. And each unto his stumbling foot to hold his torch was fain, for over the moon was roll'd a mighty cloud from heaven to blot her light. And through the darkness for long while was seen that armoured train, with waving fires to thread downwards by pass, defile, and black ravine, each leading on the way that he was led. Slowly they gained the plain, and one by one into the shadows of the woods were gone, or in the clinging mists were quenched and fled. But unto Psyche, pondering over her doom in tearful silence on her stony chair, a Zephyr, straying out of heaven's wide room, rushed down, and gathering round her unaware, filled with his breath her vesture and her veil, and like a ship that, crowding all her sail, leans to accompany the tranquil air. She yielded, and was borne with swimming brain and airy joy along the mountain side, till, hid from earth by ridging summits twain, they came upon a valley deep and wide, where the strong Zephyr with his burden sank, and laid her down upon a grassy bank, 'mong thyme and violets and daisies pied. And straight upon the touch of that sweet bed both woe and wonder melted fast away, and sleep with gentle stress her sense overspread, gathering as darkness doth on drooping day. And nestling to the ground she slowly drew her wearied limbs together, and ere she knew, wrapt in forgetfulness and slumber lay. End of part 2. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 3 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges, Part 3, May. After long sleep, when Psyche first awoke among the grasses 'neath the open skies, and heard the mounting larks, whose carol spoke delighted invitation to arise, she lay as one who after many a league hath slept off memory with his long fatigue, and waking knows not in what place he lies. Anon her quickening thought took up its task, and all came back as it had happed overnight, the sad procession of the wedding mask, the melancholy toiling up the height, the solitary rock where she was left, and thence in dark and airy waftage reft, how on the flowers she had been disburdened light. Thereafter she would rise and see what place that voyage had its haven in, and found she stood upon a little hill, whose base shelved off into the valley all around, and all round that the steep cliffs rose away, save on one side, where to the break of day the widening dale withdrew in falling ground. There out from over sea, and scarce so high as she, the sun above his watery blaze upbroke the grey dome of the morning sky, and struck the island with his level rays, sifting his gold through lazy mists that still climbed on the shadowy roots of every hill, and in the tree-tops breathed their silvery haze. At hand on either side there was a wood, and on the upward lawn that sloped between, not many paces back, a temple stood, by even steps ascending from the green, with shaft and pediment of marble made. It filled the passage of the rising glade, and there withstayed the sun in dazzling sheen. Too fair for human art, so Psyche thought, it might the fancy of some god rejoice, like to those halls which lame Hephaestus wrought, original for each god to his choice, in high Olympus, where his matchless lyre Apollo wakes, and the responsive choir of muses sing alternate with sweet voice. Wondering she drew anigh, and in a while went up the steps as she would entrance win, and faced her shadow 'neath the peristyle upon the golden gate, whose flanges twin, as there she stood irresolute at heart, to try swung to her of themselves apart, whereat she passed between and stood within. A foursquare court it was, with marble floored, embayed about with pillared porticos, that echoed in a somnolent accord the music of a fountain, which arose sparkling in air and splashing in its tank, whose wanton babble, as it swelled or sank, gave idle voice to silence and repose. Through doors beneath the further colonnade, like our deep cups reflected glooms of gold, the inner rooms glowed with inviting shade, and, standing in the court, she might behold cedar and silk and silver, and that all the pargeting of ceiling and of wall was frescoed over with figures manifold. Then making bold to go within, she heard murmur of gentle welcome in her ear, and seeing none that could have spoken word, she waited, when again "Lady, draw near, enter," was cried. And now more voices came from all the air around, calling her name, and bidding her rejoice and have no fear. And one, if she would rest, would show her bed, pillow'd for sleep with fragrant linen fine. One, were she hungry, had a table spread, like as the high gods have it when they dine. Or would she bathe where those would heat the bath, the joyous cries contending in her path. "Psyche," they said, "what wilt thou? All is thine." Then Psyche would have thank'd their service true, but that she fear'd her echoing words might scare those sightless tongues, and well by dream she knew the voices of the messengers of prayer, which fly upon the gods' commandment when they answer the supreme desires of men, or for a while in pity hush their care. 'Twas fancy's consummation, and because she would do joy no curious despite, she made no wonder how the wonder was, only concerned to take her full delight. So to the bath, what luxury could be better enhanced by eyeless ministry, she follows with the voices that invite. There, being deliciously refresh'd from soil of earth made pure by water, fire, and air, they clad her in soft robes of Asian toil, scented that in her queenly wardrobe were, and led her forth to dine. And all around sang as they served, the while a choral sound of strings unseen and reeds the burden bear. Pathetic strains and passionate they wove, urgent in ecstasies of heavenly sense, responsive rivalries that, while they strove, combined in full harmonious suspense, entrancing wild desire, then fell at last, lull'd in soft closes, and with gay contrast launched forth their fresh unwearied excellence. Now Psyche, when her twofold feast was over, would feed her eye, and choosing for her guide a low voiced singer, bade her come explore the wondrous house, until on every side as surfeited with beauty, and seeing nought but what was rich and fair beyond her thought, and all her own, thus to the voice she cried: "Am I indeed a goddess, or is this but to be dead? And through the gates of death passing unwittingly, doth man not miss body, nor memory, nor living breath? Nor by demerits of his deeds is cast, but, paid with the desire he holdeth fast, is holp with all his heart imagineth?" But her for all reply the wandering tongue call'd to the chamber where her bed was laid, with flower'd broideries of linen hung, and round the walls in painting were portray'd Love's victories over the gods renown'd. Ares and Aphrodite here lay bound in the fine net that dark Hephaestus made. Here Zeus, in likeness of a tawny bull, stoop'd on the Cretan shore his mighty knee, while off his back Europa, beautiful, stepp'd pale against the blue Carpathian sea. And here Apollo, as he caught amazed Daphne, for lo, her hands shot forth upraised in leaves, her feet were rooted like a tree. Here Dionysus, springing from his car at sight of Ariadne, here unleapt Adonis to the chase, breaking the bar of Aphrodite's arm for love who wept, he spear in hand, with leashed dogs at strain, a marvellous work. But Psyche, soon grown fain of rest, betook her to her bed and slept. Nor long had slept, when at a sudden stir she woke, and one that through the dark made way drew near and stood beside, and over her the curtain rustled. Trembling now she lay, fainting with terror, till upon her face a kiss, and with two gentle arms embrace, a voice that called her name in loving play. Though for the darkness she could nothing see, she wished not then for what the night denied. This was the lover she had lack'd, and she, loving his loving, was his willing bride. Overjoy'd she slept again, overjoy'd awoke at break of morn upon her love to look, when lo, his empty place lay by her side. So all that day she spent in company of these soft voices, and of right they said: "Art thou our lady now? Be happily thy bridal morrow by thy servants sped." But she but long'd for night, if that might bring her lover back, and he on secret wing came with the dark, and in the darkness fled. And this was all her life, for every night he came, and though his name she never learn'd, nor was his image yielded to her sight at morn or eve, she neither looked nor yearn'd beyond her happiness, and custom brought an ease to pleasure, nor would Psyche's thought have ever to her earthly home return'd. But that one night he said: "Psyche, my soul, sad danger threatens us. Thy sisters twain come to the mountain top, whence I thee stole, and thou wilt hear their voices thence complain. Answer them not, for it must end our love, if they should hear or spy thee from above. And Psyche said, their cry shall be in vain. But being again alone, she thought 'twas hard on her own blood, and blamed her joy as thief of theirs, her comfort which their comfort barr'd, when she their care might be their care's relief. All day she brooded on her father's woe, and when at night her lover kiss'd her, lo, her tender face was wet with tears of grief. Then, questioned why she wept, she all confess'd, and begg'd of him she might but once go nigh, to set her sire's and sisters' fears at rest, till he for pity could not but comply. Only if they should ask thee of thy love, discover nothing to their ears above. And Psyche said, in vain shall be their cry. And yet with day no sooner was alone, than she for loneliness her promise rued, that having so much pleasure for her own, 'twas all unshared and spent in solitude. And when at night her love flew to his place, more than afore she shamed his fond embrace, and piteously with tears her plaint renewed. The more he now denied, the more she wept, nor would in any wise be comforted, unless her sisters on the Zephyr swept should in those halls be one day bathed and fed, and see themselves the palace where she reigned. And he by force of tears at last constrained, granted her wish unwillingly, and said, much to our peril hast thou won thy will. Thy sister's love, seeing thee honour'd so, will sour to envy, and with jealous skill will pry to learn the thing that none may know. Answer not, nor inquire, for know that I, the day thou seest my face, far hence shall fly, and thou anew to bitterest fate must go. But Psyche said, thy love is more than life, to have thee leaveth nothing to be won. For should the noonday prove me to be wife, even of the beauteous Eros, who is son of Cyprus, I could never love thee more. Whereat he fondly kiss'd her over and over, and peace was twixt them till the night was done. End of part 3. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 4 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges, Part 4, June. And truly need there was to the old king for consolation, since the mournful day of Psyche's fate he took no comforting, but only for a speedy death would pray. And on his head his hair grew silver white, such on life's topmost bough is sorrow's blight, when the stout heart is cankering to decay. Which when his daughters learnt, they both were quick comfort and solace to their sire to lend. But as not seldom they who nurse the sick will take them a lady from them they tend, so happed it now. For they who fail'd to cheer grew sad themselves, and in that palace drear increased the evil that they came to mend. And them the unhappy father sent to seek where Psyche had been left, if they might find what monster held her on the savage peak, or if she there had died of hunger pined, and by wild eagles stripped, her scattered bones might still be gathered from the barren stones, or if her fate had left no trace behind. So just upon this time her sisters both climbed on the cliff that hung over Psyche's vale, and finding there no sign to leave were loth, ere well assured she lurked not within hail. So calling loud her name, Psyche, they cried, Psyche, O Psyche! And when none replied, they sank upon the rocks to weep and wail. But Psyche heard their voices where she sat, and summoning the Zephyr bade him fleet those mourners down unto the grassy plat, midst of her garden, where she had her seat. Then from the dizzy step the wondering pair came swiftly sinking on his buoyant air, and stood upon the terrace at her feet. Up sprang she then, and kiss'd them, and embraced, and said, Lo, here am I whom ye mourn. I am not dead, nor tortured, nor disgraced, but blessed above all days since I was born. Wherefore be glad, enter my home, and see how little cause has been to grieve for me, and my desertion on the rocks forlorn. So entering by the golden gate, or ever the marvel of their hither flight had waned, fresh wonder took them now, for everywhere Their eyes that lit on beauty were enchained, and Psyche's airy service, as she bade, performed its magic office, and displayed the riches of the palace where she reigned. And through the perfumed chambers they were led, and bathed therein, and after set to sup, were upon dreamlike delicacies fed, and wine more precious than its golden cup. Till seeing nothing lacked, and nought was theirs, their happiness fell from them unawares, and bitter envy in their hearts sprang up. At last one said, Psyche, since not alone thou livest here in joy, as well we wot, who is the man who should these wonders own, or god, I say, and still appeareth not? What is his name? What rank and guise hath he? Whom winds and spirits serve, who honoureth thee above all others in thy blissful lot? But Psyche, when that wistful speech she heard, was ware of all her spouse had warned her of, and uttering a disingenuous word, said, A youth yet unbearded is my love. He goeth hunting on the plains to-day, and with his dogs hath wandered far away, and not till eve can he return above. Then, fearing to be near applied, she rose, and brought her richest jewels one by one, bidding them choose and take whatever they chose, and beckoning the Zephyr, spake anon, that he should waft her sisters to the peak. The which he did, and ere they more could speak, they rose on high, and in the wind were gone. Nor till again they came upon the road, which from the mountain shoulder over the plain led to the city of their sire's abode, found they their tongues, though full of high disdain, their hearts were, but kept silence, till the strength of pride and envious hatred burst at length in voice, and thus the elder gan complain. Cruel and unjust fortune, that of three sisters, whose being from one fountain well'd exalts the last so high from her degree, and leaves the first to be so far excell'd. My husband is a poor and niggard churl, to him, whoever he be, that loves the girl. Oh, in what godlike state her house is held! Ay, said the other, to a gouty loon am I not wedded. Lo, thy hurt is mine, but never call me woman more, if soon I cannot lure her from her height divine. Nay, she shall need her cunning wit to save the wealth of which so grudgingly she gave. Wherefore thy hand and heart with me combine. She but received us out of pride, to show her state, well deeming that her happiness was little worth while there was none to know. So is our lot uninjured if none guess. Reveal we nothing therefore, but the while together scheme this wanton to beguile, and bring her boasting godhead to distress. So, fresh disordering their dress and hair, with loud lament they to their sire return, telling they found not Psyche anywhere, and of her sure mischance could nothing learn. And with that lie the wounded man they slew, hiding the saving truth, which well they knew, nor did his piteous grief their heart concern. Meanwhile her unknown lover did not cease to warn poor Psyche how her sisters planned to undermine her love and joy and peace, and urged how well she might their wiles withstand, by keeping them from her delight aloof. For better is security than proof, and malice held afar than near at hand. And dearest wife, he said, since 'tis not long ere one will come to share thy secrecy, and be thy babe and mine, let nothing wrong the happy months of thy maternity. If thou keep trust, then shalt thou see thy child a god. But if to pride thou be beguiled, the lot of both is death and misery. Then Psyche's simple heart was filled with joy, and counting to herself the months and days, looked for the time when she should bear a boy, to be her growing stay and godlike praise. And oh, be sure, she said, be sure my pride, having so rich a promise, cannot slide, even if my love could fail, which thee obeys. And so most happily her life went by, in thoughts of love dear to her new estate, until at length the evil day drew nigh, when now her sisters, joined in jealous hate, set forth again and plotted by the way, how they might best allure her to betray her secret, with what lie their angle bait. That night her husband spake to her and said, Psyche, thy sisters come, and when they climb the peak they will not tarry to be sped down by the Zephyr as that other time, but winging to the wind will cast themselves out in the air, and on the rocky shelves be dashed, and pay the penalty of crime. So let it be, and so shall we be saved. Which meditated vengeance of his fear, when Psyche heard now for their life she craved, whose mere distress erewhile had touch'd her near. Around her lover's neck her arms she threw, and pleaded for them by her faith so true. although they went on doom in judgment clear. In terror of blood guiltiness she now forgot all other danger she adjured, or using playfulness deep sobs would plough her soft entreaties not to be endured, till he at last was fain once more to grant the service of the Zephyr to enchant that wicked couple from their fate assured. So ere 'twas noon were noises at the door of knocking loud, and voices high in glee, such as within that vale never before had been, and now seemed most unmeet to be. And Psyche blush'd, though being alone, and rose to meet her sisters, and herself unclose the gate that made them of her palace free. Fondly she kiss'd them, and with kindly cheer sought to amuse, and they with outward smile overmask'd their hate, and call'd her sweet and dear, finding affection easy to beguile. And all was smooth, until at last one said, "Tell us, I pray, to whom 'tis thou art wed, 'mong gods or men, what is his rank and style?" "Thou canst not think to hide the truth from us, who knew thy peevish sorrows when a maid, and see thee now so glad and rapturous, as changed from what thou wert as light from shade. Thy jewels too, the palace of a king, nor least the serviceable spiriting, why everything thy secret is betrayed. And yet thou talkest of thy wondrous man, no more than if his face thou didst not know." At which incontinently she began, forgetful of her word a month ago, answering, "A merchant rich of middle age my husband is, and over his features sage, his temples are already touch'd with snow. But 'gainst his wish, since hither you were brought, 'twere best to part." Then her accustomed spell sped them upon the summit quick as thought, and being alone her doing pleased her well. So was she vex'd to find her love at night more sad than ever of her sister's spite, speaking as one that could the end foretell. "And ere long," said he, "they will spy again, let them be dash'd upon the rocks and die. 'Tis they must come to death, or thou to pain, to separation, Psyche, thou and I. Nay, and our babe to ill. I therefore crave thou wilt not even once more these vipers save, nor to thy love his only boon deny." But Psyche would not think her sister's crime so gross and strange, nor could her danger see, since 'twere so easy, if at any time they show'd the venom of their hearts, that she should fan them off upon the willing gust. So she refused, and claiming truer trust, would in no wise unto their death agree. End of Part 4. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 5 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. Part 5. July. "What think you, sister?" thus one envious fiend to other spake upon their homeward route. "What of the story that our wit hath gleaned of this mysterious lover, who can shoot in 30 days from beardless youth to prime, with wisdom in his face before his time, and snowy locks upon his head to boot?" "Ay," said the other, "true, she lied not well, and thence I gather knows no more than we. For surely 'tis a spirit insensible, to whom she is wedded, one she cannot see. 'Tis that I fear, for if 'tis so, her child will be a god, and she a goddess styled, which, though I die to let it, shall not be. Lament we thus no longer, come consult what may be done." And home they came at night, yet not to rest, but of their plots occult sat whispering on their beds, and ere 'twas light, resolving on the deed, could not defer, but roused the sleeping house with sudden stir, and sallied forth alone to work their spite. And with the noon were climb'd upon the peak, and swam down on the Zephyr as before. But now with piercing cry and doleful shriek they force their entrance through the golden door, feigning the urgency of bitter truth, such as deforms a friendly face with ruth, when kindness may not hide ill tidings more. Then Psyche, when she heard their wailful din, and saw their countenances wan and worn with travel, vigil, and disfiguring sin, their hair dishevell'd and their habits torn, for trembling scarce could ask what ill had hapt, and they, alert with joy to see her trapp'd, launched forth amain and on their drift were borne. O Psyche, happiest certainly and blest up to this hour, they said, thou surely wert, being of thy fearful peril unpossessed, which now we would not tell but to avert. But we in solemn truth thy spouse have found, to be the dragon of this mountain ground, who holds thee here to work thy shame and hurt. As, yesternight, we rode upon the wind, he issued to pursue us from the wood. We saw his back, that through the tree-tops finned, his fiery eyes glared from their wrinkled hood. Lo, now betimes the oracle, which said how to the savage beast thou shouldst be wed, is plainly for thy safety understood. Long time hath he been known to all that dwell upon the plain, but now his secret lair have we discovered, which none else could tell. Though many women fallen in his snare hath he enchanted, who, tradition saith, taste love a while, ere to their cruel death they pass in turn upon the summits bare. Fly with us while thou mayst, no more delay, renounce the spells of this accursed vale. We come to save thee, but we dare not stay among these sightless spirits, our senses quail. Fly with us, fly! Then Psyche for her soul was soft and simple, lost her self-control, and thinking only of the horrid tale. Dear sisters, said she, and her sobbing speech was broken by her terror, it is true that much hath happed to stablish what ye teach, for never hath it been granted me to view my husband, and for aught I know he may be even that cruel dragon which ye say peered at you from the forest to pursue. 'Tis sure that scarcely can I win his grace to see you here, and still he mischief vows, if ever I should ask to see his face, which coming in the dark he never allows. Therefore, if ye can help, of pity show, since doubt I must, how I may come to know what kind of spirit it is that is my spouse. Then to her cue the younger was afore. Hide thou a razor, cried she, near thy bed, and have a lamp prepared, but whelm thereover some cover, that no light be from it shed. And when securely in first sleep he lies, look on him well, and ere he can arise, gashing his throat, cut off his hideous head. Which both persuading, off they flew content, divining that whatever she was forbid was by her lover for her safety meant, which only could be sure while he was hid. But Psyche, to that miserable deed, being now already in her mind agreed, wandered alone, and knew not what she did. Now she would trust her lover, now in turn made question of his bidding as unjust. But thirsting curiosity to learn his secret overcame her simple trust, overcame her spoken troth, overcame her fear. And she prepared, as now the hour drew near, the mean contrivances, nor felt disgust. She set the lamp beneath a chair, and cloaked thickly its rebel lustre from the eye, and laid the knife, to mortal keenness stroked, within her reach, where she was wont to lie, and took her place full early. But her heart beat fast, and stayed her breath with sudden start, feeling her lover's arm laid fond thereby. But when at last he slept, then she arose, all faint and tremulous. And though it be that wrong betrayeth innocence with shows of novelty, its guilt from shame to free, yet 'twas for shame her hand so strangely shook that held the steel, and from the cloak that took the lamp, and raised it over the bed to see. She had some fear she might not well discern by that small flame a monster in the gloom, when lo! the air about her seemed to burn, and bright celestial radiance filled the room. Too plainly, she saw, fair to see, Eros, 'twas Eros' self, her lover, he, the god of love, revealed in deathless bloom. Her fainting strength forsook her, on her knees down by the bed she sank. The shameless knife fell flashing, and her heart took thought to seize its desperate haft, and end her wicked life. Yet could she not her loving eyes withdraw from her fair sleeping lover, whom she saw only to know she was no more his wife. O treasure of all treasures, late her own! O loss above all losses, lost for aye, since there was no repentance could atone for her dishonour, nor her fate withstay. But yet 'twas joy to have her love in sight, and to the rapture yielding while she might, she gazed upon his body where he lay. Above all mortal beauty as was hers, she saw a rival. But if passion's heart be rightly read by subtle questioners, it owns a wanton and a gentler part. And Psyche wonder'd, noting every sign by which the immortal God, her spouse divine, betrayed the image of our earthly art. his thickly curling hair, his ruddy cheeks and pouting lips, his soft and dimpled chin, the full and cushioned eye that idly speaks of self-content and vanity within, the froward ear, and smooth to touch, his body sleek but rounded overmuch, for dignity of mind and pride akin. She noted that the small irradiant wings that from his shoulders lay long at rest were yet disturbed with airy quiverings, as if some wakeful spirit his blood possessed. She feared he was awaking, but they kept their sweet commotion still, and still he slept, and still she gazed with never tiring zest. And now the colour of her pride and joy outflushed the hue of Eros, she so cold to have fired the passion of the heartless boy, whom none in heaven or earth were found to hold. Psyche, the earthborn, to be prized above the heavenly graces by the god of love, and worshipped by his wantonness untold. Nay, for that very thing she loved him more than herself, her sweet self's complement, until the sight of him again upbore her courage and renewed her vigour spent. And looking now around, she first espied where at the bed's foot, cast in haste aside, lay his full quiver and his bow unbent. One of those darts of which she had heard so oft, she took to try if 'twas so very keen, and held its point against her finger soft, so gently that to touch it scarce was seen. Yet was she sharply pricked, and felt the fire run through her veins, and now a strange desire troubled her heart, which never before had been. Straight sprang she to her lover on the bed, and kissed his cheek, and was not satisfied, when, the lamp held ill balanced overhead, one drop of burning oil spilled from its side on Eros' naked shoulder as he slept, who, wakened by the sudden smart, upleapt upon the floor, and all the mischief eyed. With nervous speed he seized his bow, and passed out of the guilty chamber at a bound. But Psyche, following his flight as fast, caught him, and crying, threw her arms around, till coming to the court he rose in air. And she, close clinging in her last despair, was dragged, and then lost hold, and fell to ground. Wailing she fell, but he upon the roof, staying his feet a while, his flight delayed, and turning to her as he stood aloof beside a cypress, whose profoundest shade drank the reflections of the dreamy night, in its stiff pinnacle the nimble light of million stars upon his body played. O simple-hearted Psyche, thus he spake, and she upraised her piteous eyes and hands. O simple-hearted Psyche, for thy sake I dared to break my mother's stern commands, and gave thee godlike marriage in the place of vilest shame, and not to hurt thy grace, spared thee my arrows, which no heart withstands. But thou, for doubt I was some evil beast, hast mocked the warnings of my love, to spy upon my secret, which concerned thee least, seeing that thy joy was never touched thereby. By faithless prying thou hast worked thy fall, and even as I foretold thee, losest all, for looking on thy happiness too nigh. Which loss may be thine ample punishment. But to those fiends by whom thou wert misled, go tell each one in turn that I have sent this message, that I love her in thy stead, and bid them by their love haste hither soon. Whereat he fled, and Psyche in a swoon fell back upon the marble floor as dead. End of part 5. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 6 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. Part 6. August. When from the lowest ebbing of her blood the fluttering pulses thrilled and swelled again, her stricken heart recovering force to flood with life the sunken conduits of her brain, then Psyche, where she had fallen numb and cold, arose, but scarce her quaking sense controlled, seeing the couch where she that night had lain. The level sunbeams searched the grassy ground for diamond dewdrops. Was this the place? Where was the court, her home? She looked around, and questioned with her memory for a space. There was the cypress, there the well-known wood, that walled the spot. 'Twas here her palace stood, as surely as 'twas vanished without trace. Was all a dream? To think that all was dreamt were now the happier thought, but arguing over that dream it was, she fell from her attempt, feeling the wifely burden that she bore. Nay, true, 'twas true, she had had all and lost. The joy, the reckless wrong, the heavy cost, were hers, the dead end now, and woe in store. What to be done? Fainting and shelterless upon the mountain, it were death to bide, and harbour none, she knew, where her distress might comfort find, or love's dishonour hide. Nor felt she any dread like that of home, yet forth she must, albeit to rove and roam, an outcast over the country far and wide. Anon she marvelled, noting from the vale a path lead downward to the plain below, crossing the very site whereon the pale of all her joy had stood few hours ago, a run of mountain beasts that keep their track through generations and for ages back, had trod the self-same footing to and fro. That would she try, so forth she took her way, turning her face from the dishonoured dell, adown the broadening eastward lawns, which lay in gentle slant, till suddenly they fell in sheer cliff, whence the path that went around clomb by the bluffs, or ever it downward wound beneath the precipice impassable. There once she turned, and gazing up the slope, she bid the scene of all her joy adieu. Ay, and farewell, she cried, farewell to hope, since there is none will rescue me anew, who have killed God's perfection with a doubt. Which said, she took the path that led about, and hid the upward pleasance from her view. But soon it left her, entering neath the shade of cedar old and russeted tall pine, whose mighty tops, seen from the thorny glade, belted the hills about, and now no sign had she to guide her save the slow descent. But swiftly over the springy floor she went, and drew the odorous air like draughts of wine. Then next she passed a forest thick and dark, with heavy ilexes and plantains high, and came to long lush grass, and now could mark by many a token that the plain was nigh. When lo! a river, to whose bank at last being come, upon the bank her limbs she cast, and through her sad tears watched the stream go by. And now the thought came over her that in death there was a cure for sorrow, that before her eyes ran Lethe she might take one breath of water and be freed for evermore. Leaning to look into her tomb thereon, she saw the horror of her image wan, and up she rose at height to leap from shore. When suddenly a mighty voice that fell with fury on her ears their sense to scare, that bounding from the tree trunks like the yell of 100 brazen trumpets cried, Forbear, forbear, fond maid, that forward step to take, for life can cure the ills that love may make, but for the harm of death is no repair. Then looking up she saw an uncouth form perched on the further bank, whose parted lips volleyed their friendly warning in a storm. A man he might have been, but for the tips of horns appearing from his shaggy head, for over his matted beard his face was red, and all his shape was manlike to the hips. In forehead low, keen eye, and nostril flat, he bore the human grace in mean degree, but set beneath his body squat and fat, legs like a goat's, and from the hairy knee the shank fell spare, and though crosswise he put his limbs in easeful posture, for the foot the beast's divided hoof was plain to see. Him then she knew, the mighty choric god, the great hill-haunting and tree-loving Pan, whom Zeus had laughed to see when first he trod Olympus, neither god nor beast nor man, who every rocky peak and snowy crest of the Aspran mountains for his own possessed, and all their Alps with Bacchic rout overran. Whom, when his pipe he plays on loud and sweet, and over the fitted reeds his moist lip flees, around in measured step with nimble feet water nymphs dance and hammer Dryades, and all the woodland's airy folk who shun man's presence to his frolic pastime run from their perennial wells and sacred trees. Now on his knee, his pipe laid by, he spoke with flippant tongue, wounding unwittingly the heart he sought to cheer with jest and joke. And what hast thou to do with misery? He said, who hast such beauty as might gain the love of Eros? Cast away thy pain, and give thy soul to mirth and jollity. Thy mortal life is but a brittle vase, but as thee list with wine or tears to fill, for all the drops therein are O's and R's, of joy or grief according to thy will. And wouldst thou learn of me my merry way, I'd teach thee change thy lover every day, and prize the cup that thou wert fain to spill. Nay, if thou plunge thou shalt not drown nor sink, for I will to thee over the stream afloat, and bear thee safe. And oh, I know a drink for care that makes sweet music in the throat. Come live with me, my love, I'll cure thy chance, for I can laugh and quaff and pipe and dance, swim like a fish and caper like a goat. Speaking, his brute divinity explored the secret of her silence, and old Pan grew kind and told her of a shallow ford, where lower down the stream over pebbles ran, and one might pass at ease with ankles dry. Whither she went, and crossing over thereby, her lonely wanderings through the isle began. But none could tell, no, nor herself had told, where food she found, or shelter through the land by day or night, until by fate controlled she came by steep ways to the southern strand, where, sacred to the twins and Britomart, pent in its rocky theatre apart, a little town stood on the level sand. 'Twas where her younger sister's husband reigned, and Psyche to the palace gate drew near, helplessly still by Eros' hest constrained, and knocking begged to see her sister dear. But when in state stepped down that haughty queen, and saw the wan face spent with tears and teen, she smiled and said, "Psyche, what dost thou here?" Then Psyche told how, having well employ'd their means, and done their bidding not amiss, looking on him her hand would have destroy'd. 'Twas Eros, whom in love leaning to kiss, even as she kiss'd a drop of burning oil fallen from the lamp, had served her scheme to foil, discovering her in vision of her bliss. Wherewith the god stung like a startled bird, arose in air, and she fell back in swoon. But ere he parted, said she, he conferr'd on thee the irrecoverable boon, by prying lost to me. "Go tell," he said, "thy sister that I love her in thy stead, and bid her by her love haste hither soon." Which when that heart of malice heard, it took the jealous fancy of her silly lust, and pitilessly with triumphant look she drank the flattery, and gave full trust, and leaving Psyche ere she more could tell, ran off to bid her spouse for aye farewell, and in his ear this ready lie she thrust: "My dearest sister Psyche, she whose fate we mourn'd hath reappear'd alive and hale, but brings sad news. My father dies, full late these tidings come, but love may yet avail. Let me be gone." And stealing blind consent, forth on that well remember'd road she went, and climb'd upon the peak above the dale. Here on the topmost rock, where Psyche first had by her weeping sire been left to die, she stood a moment, in her hope accurst, being happy, and the cliffs took up her cry with chuckling mockery from her tongue above: "Zephyr, sweet Zephyr, waft me to my love!" When off she leapt upon his wings to fly. But as a dead stone from a height let fall, silent and straight, is gathered by the force of earth's vast mass upon its weight, so small, in speed increasing as it nears its source of motion, by which law all things soever are clutch'd and dragg'd and held, so fell she there, like a dead stone, down in her headlong course. The disregardful silence heard her strike upon the solid crags, her dismal shriek rang on the rocks, and died out, laughter like, along the vale in hurried trebles weak. And soon upon her from their skyey haunt fell to their feast the great birds bald and gaunt, and gorged on her fair flesh with bloody beak. But Psyche, when her sister was gone forth, went out again her wandering way to take, and following a stream that led her north, after some days she passed the Corian lake, whereby Athena's temple stands, and he who traverses the isle from sea to sea may by the plain his shortest journey make. Till on the northern coast arrived she came upon a city built about a port, the which she knew, soon as she heard the name, was where her elder sister had her court, to whom, as Eros had commanded her, she now in turn became the messenger of vengeful punishment that fell not short. For she too, hearing, 'gan her heart exult, nor pity felt for Psyche's tears and moans, but fellow'd with that other in her fault, follow'd her to her fate upon the stones, and from the peak leaping like her below the self-same way, until the self-same woe lay dash'd to death upon her sister's bones. End of part 6. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 7 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. Part 7. September. On the Hellenic board of Crete's fair isle, westward of Drepanon, along a reach which massy Siamum for many a mile, jutting to sea, delivers from the breach of north and east, returning to Bay, the favoured shore, an ancient city lay, Aptera, which is wingless in our speech. And hence the name, that here in rocky cove, thence called Museion, was the trial waged, what day the Sirens with the Muses strove, by jealous Hera in that war engaged, wherein the daughters of Mnemosyne overcame the chauntresses who vexed the sea, nor vengeance spared them by their pride enraged. For those strange creatures who with women's words and wiles made ravenous prey of passers-by were throated with the liquid pipe of birds, of love they sang, and none who sailed anigh through the grey hazes of the Cyanine sea had wit the whirlpool of that song to flee, nor feared the talon-hooked and feathered thigh. But them the singers of the gods overcame, and plucked them of their plumage, where in fright they vainly fluttered off to hide their shame, upon two rocks that lie within the bight, under the headland, barren and alone, which being with the scattered feathers strewn, were by the folk named Leucae, which is white. Thereon about this time the snowy gull, minion of Aphrodite, being come, plumed himself, standing on the sea-wrack dull, that drifted from the foot of Siamum. And 'twas his thought, that had the goddess learnt the tale of Psyche loved and Eros burnt, she never so long had kept aloof and dumb. Wherefore that duteous gossip of love's queen devised that he the messenger would be, and rising from the rock he skimmed between the chasing waves, such grace have none but he, into the middle deep, then down he dived, and rowing with his glistening wings arrived at Aphrodite's bower beneath the sea. The eddies from his silver pinions swirled the crimson, green and yellow floss that grew about the caves, and at his passing curled its graceful silk and gently waved anew, till oaring here and there the queen he found, strayed from her haunt unto a sandy ground, dappled with eye-rings in the sunlight blue. She, as he came upon her from above, with Hora played, Hora, her herald fair, that lays the soft necessity of love on maidens' eyelids, and with tender care marketh the hour, as in all works is fit, and happy they in love, who time outwit, fondly constrained in her season rare. But he with garrulous and laughing tongue broke up his news, how Eros, fallen sick, lay tossing on his bed, to frenzy stung by such a burn as did but barely prick a little bleb, no bigger than a pease. Upon his shoulder 'twas that killed his ease, fevered his heart, and made his breathing thick. For which disaster hath he not been seen this many a day at all in any place? And thou, dear mistress, piped he, hast not been thyself amongst us now a dreary space? The pining mortals suffer from a dearth of love, and for this sadness of the earth thy family is darkened with disgrace. Now on the secret paths of dale and wood, where lovers walked, are lovers none to find, and friends besworn to equal brotherhood forget their faith, and part with words unkind. In the first moon thy honey bond is loathed, and I could tell even of the new betrothed, that fly over sea and leave their loves behind. Summer is over, but the merry pipe that wont to cheer the harvesting is mute, and in the vineyards where the grape is ripe no voice is heard of them that take the fruit. No workman singeth at eve, nor maiden danceth, all joy is dead, and as the year advanceth, the signs of woe increase on man and brute. 'Tis plain that if thy pleasure longer pause, thy mighty rule on earth hath seen its day. The race must come to perish, and no cause but that thou sittest with thy nymphs at play, while on a Cretan hill thy truant boy hath with his pretty mistress turned to toy, and less for pain than love pineth away. Ha! Mistress, cried she, hath my beardless son been hunting for himself his lovely game? Some young Orestiad hath his fancy won, some Naiad, say, or is a Grace his flame? Or maybe Muse, and then 'tis Erato, the trifling wanton. Tell me, if thou know, woman or goddess is she? And her name. Then said the snowy gull, O heavenly queen, what is my knowledge, who am but a bird? Yet is she only mortal, as I ween, and named Psyche, if I rightly heard. But Aphrodite's look daunted his cheer, a scare he fled away, screaming in fear, to see what wrath his simple tale had stirred. He flashed his pens, and sweeping widely round, towered to air so swift in all his way, that whence he dived he there again was found, as soon as if he had but dipped for prey. And now or ever he joined his wailful flock, once more he stood upon the Sirens' rock, and preened his ruffled quills for fresh display. But as ill tidings will their truth assure without more witness than their fatal sense, so since was nothing bitterer to endure, the injured goddess guessed the full offence, and doubted only whether first to smite, or Psyche for her new presumptuous flight, or Eros for his disobedience. But full of anger to her son she went, and found him in his golden chamber laid, and with him sweet Euphrosyne, attent upon his murmured wants, aye, as he bade, shifted the pillows with each fretful whim. But scornfully his mother looked at him, and reckless of his pain gan thus upbraid. O worthy deeds, I say, and true to blood, the crown and pledge of promise, thou that wast in estimation my perpetual bud, now fruiting thus untimely to my cost, backsliding from commandment, and worse, with bliss to favour one I bade thee curse, and save the life I left with thee for lost. Thou too to burn with love, and love of her whom I did hate, and to thy bed to take my rival, that my trusted officer might of mine enemy my daughter make. Dost thou then think my love for thee so fond, and miserably doting that the bond, by such dishonour strained, will not break? Or that I cannot bear another son as good as thou, or if I chose not bear, not beg as good a lusty boy of one of all my nymphs, and some have boys to spare, whom I might train, to whom thine arms made o'er should do me kinder service than before, to smite my foes and keep my honour fair. For thou hast ever mocked me and beguiled in amours strange, my God, thy valiant sire, and having smirched our fame while yet a child, wilt further foul it now with earthly fire. But I, do as thou may, have vowed to kill thy fancied girl, whether thou love her still, or of her silly charms already tire. Tell me but where she hides. And Eros now, proud in his woe, boasted his happy theft, confessing he had loved her well, and how, by her own doing, she was lost and left, and homeless in such sorrow as outwent the utmost pain of other punishment, was wandering of his love and favour reft. By which was Cyprus gladdened, not appeased, but hid her joy, and spake no more her threat, and left with face like one that much displeased hath yet betrayed that he can wrong forget. When lo, as swiftly she came stepping down from her fair house into the heavenly town, the Cronian sisters on the way she met. Hera, the wife of Zeus, her placid front dark with the shadow of his troubled reign, and tall Demeter, who with men once wont, holding the high Olympians in disdain, for Periphasis' rape, which now forgiven, she had returned unto the courts of heaven, and 'mong the immortals lived at peace again. Whose smile told Aphrodite that they knew the meaning of her visit, and a flush of anger answered them, while hot she grew. But Hera laughed outright. Why, thou dost blush? Now see we modest manners on my life, and all thy little son has got a wife, can make the crimson to thy forehead rush. Didst think he, whom thou madest passion's prince, no privy dart then for himself would poise? Nay, by the cuckoo on my sceptre, since 'twas love that made thee mother of his joys, art thou the foremost to his favour bound, as thou shouldst be the last to think to sound the heart, and least of all thy wanton boys. But her Demeter, on whose stalwart arm she leaned, took up. If thou wilt hark to me, this Psyche, said she, hath the heavenly charm, and will become immortal, and may be. To marry with a woman is as well as wed a god and live below in hell, as 'twas my lot in child of mine to see. Which things they both said, fearing in their hearts that savage Eros, if they mocked his case, would kill their peace with his revengeful darts, and bring them haply to a worse disgrace. But Aphrodite saying, "Good, my dames, behind this smoke I see the spite that flames," left them, and on her journey went apace. For having purposed she would hold no truce with Psyche or her son, 'twas in her mind to go forthwith unto the throne of Zeus, and beg that Hermes might be sent to find the wanderer, and secure that in such quest he would not fail. She pondered but how best she might inflict her vengeance long designed. End of part 7. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 8 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. Part 8. October. Heavy meanwhile at heart, with bruised feet, was Psyche wandering many nights and days upon the paths of 100-citied Crete, and chose to step the most deserted ways, being least unhappy when she went unseen, since else her secret sorrow had no screen from the plain question of men's idle gaze. Yet wheresoever she went, one hope she had, like mortal mourners who 'gainst reason strong hope to be unexpectedly made glad with sight of their dead friends, so much they long. So she for him, whom loss 1,000-fold endeared and made her desired, nor could she hold he would not turn and quite forgive her wrong. Wherefore her eager eyes in every place looked for her lover, and 'twixt hope and fear she followed oft afar some form of grace, in pain alike to lose or venture near. And still this thought cheered her fatigue, that he, or on some hill or by some brook or tree, but waited for her coming to appear. And then for comfort many an old love-crossed and doleful ditty would she gently sing, writ by sad poets of a lover lost, now sounding sweeter for her sorrowing. Echo, sweet echo, watching up on high, say, hast thou seen today my love go by, or where thou sittest by thy mossy spring? Or say, ye nymphs, that from the crystal rills, when ye have bathed your limbs from morn till eve, flying at midnight to the bare-topped hills, beneath the stars your mazy dances weave, say, my deserter, whom ye well may know by his small wings, his quiver, and his bow, say, have ye seen my love, whose loss I grieve? Till climbed one evening on a rocky steep above the plain of Kysamos, that lay robbed of its golden harvest in the deep mountainous shadows of the dying day, she saw a temple whose tall columns fair recalled her home, and, oh, if thou be there, my love, she cried, fly not again away. Swiftly she ran, and entering by the door, she stood alone within an empty fane of great Demeter. And behold, the floor was littered with thank offerings of grain, with wheat and barley sheaves together heaped, in holy harvest home of them that reaped the goddess plenteous gifts upon the plain. And on the tithe, the tackle of the tithe, thrown by in such confusion as are laid upon the swath sickle and hook and scythe, when midday drives the reapers to the shade, and Psyche, since had come no priestess there to trim the temple in her pious care, forgat herself and lent her duteous aid. She drew the offerings from the midst aside, and piled the sheaves at every pillar's base, and sweeping there between a passage wide, made clear of corn and chaff the temple space, as countrymen who bring their wheat to mart set out their show along the walls apart, by their allotted stations each in place. Thus she, and felt no weariness, such strength hath duty to support our feeble frame, till all was set in order, and at length up to the threshold of the shrine she came, when lo, before her face with friendly smile, tall as a pillar of the peristyle, the goddess stood revealed, and called her name. Unhappy Psyche, said she, know'st thou not How Aphrodite to thy hurt is sworn, and thou thy peril and her wrath forgot, spendest thy thought my temple to adorn? Take better heed. And Psyche at the voice even of so little comfort gan rejoice, and at her feet poured out this prayer forlorn. O gracious giver of the golden grain, hide me, I pray thee, from her wrath unkind. For who can pity as canst thou my pain, who wert thyself a wanderer, vexed in mind, the loss of thy dear Kore once, when as ravished to hell by fierce Agelassas, thou soughtest her on earth and couldst not find? How could thy feet bear thee to western night, and where swart Libyans watch the sacred tree, and thrice to ford over Achelous bright, and all the streams of bounteous Sicily? And thrice to Enna camest thou, thrice, they tell, satest athirst by Callichorus' well, nor tookest of the spring to comfort thee. By that remembered anguish of thine heart, Lady, have pity even on me, and show where I may find my love, and take my part for peace, I pray, against my cruel foe. Or if thou canst not from her anger shield, here let me lie among the sheaves concealed, such time till forth I may in safety go. Demeter answered, Nay, though thou constrain my favour with thy plea, my help must still be hidden, else I work for thee in vain to thwart my mighty sister in her will. Thou must fly hence, yet though I not oppose, less will I aid her, and if now I close my temple doors to thee, take it not ill. Then Psyche's hope founded, as when a ship the morrow of the gale can hardly ride the swollen seas, fetching a deeper dip at every wave, and through her gaping side and over her shattered bulwark ever drinks, till plunging in the watery wild she sinks, to scoop her grave beneath the crushing tide. So with each word her broken spirit drank its doom, and overwhelmed with deep despair she turned away, and coming forth she sank, silently weeping on the temple stair, in midmost night, forspent with long turmoil. But sleep, the gracious pursuivant of toil, came swiftly down and nursed away her care. And when the sun awaked her with his beams, she found new hope that still her sorrow's cure lay with the gods, who in her morning dreams had sent her comfort in a vision sure, wherein the Cretan-born, or mightiest god, cloud-gathering Zeus himself had seemed to nod, and bid her with good heart her woes endure. So coming that same day unto a shrine of Hera, she took courage and went in, and like to one that to the cell divine for favour ventures, or a suit to win, she drew anigh the altar from her face, wiping the tears ere to the heavenly grace, as thus she prayed, she would her prayer begin. Most honoured Lady, who from ancient doom wert made heaven's wife, and art on earth besought with gracious happiness of all, to whom thy holy wedlock hath my burden brought, save me from Aphrodite's fell pursuit, and guard unto the birth love's hapless fruit, which she for cruel spite would bring to nought. As once from her thou wert not shamed to take her beauty's zone, thy beauty to enhance, for which again Zeus loved thee, to forsake his warlike ire in faithful dalliance. Show me what means may win my love to me, or how that I may come, if so may be, within the favour of his countenance. If there be any place for tears or prayer, if there be need for succour in distress, now is the very hour of all despair. Here is the heart of grief and bitterness. Motherly pity, bend thy face and grant one beam of ruth to thy poor suppliant, nor turn me from thy altar comfortless. Even as she prayed, a cloud spread through the cell, and mid the wreathings of the vapour dim, the goddess grew in glory visible, like some barbaric queen in festal trim. Such the attire and ornaments she wore, when over the forged threshold of the floor of Zeus's house she stepped to visit him. From either ear ringed to its pierced lobe a triple jewel hang with gold enchased, and over her breasts her wide ambrosial robe with many a shining golden clasp was braced. The flowering on its smooth embroidered lawn gathered to colour where the zone was drawn, in fringe of golden tassels at her waist. Her curling hair with plaited braid and brail, pendant or looped about her head divine, lay hidden half beneath a golden veil, bright as the rippling ocean in sunshine. And on the ground, flashing whenever she stepped, Beneath her feet the dazzling lightnings leapt from the gold network of her sandals fine. Thus Hera stood in royal guise bedecked, before poor Psyche on the stair that knelt, whose new-nursed hope at that display was checked, and all her happier thoughts 'gan fade and melt. She saw no kindness in such haughty mien, and venturing not to look upon the queen, bowed down in woe to hear her sentence dealt. And thus the goddess spake: In vain thou suest, most miserable Psyche, though my heart be full of hate for her whose hate thou ruest, and pride and pity move me to thy part, yet not till Zeus make known his will could I, least of the blameless gods that dwell on high, assist thee wert thou worthier than thou art. But know, if Eros love thee, that thy hopes should rest on him, and I would bid thee go where in his mother's house apart he mopes, grieving for loss of thee in secret woe. For should he take thee back, there is no power in earth or heaven will hurt thee from that hour, nay, not if Zeus himself should prove thy foe. Thus saying, she was gone, and Psyche now, surprised by comfort, rose and went her way, resolved in heart, and only wondering how 'twas possible to come where Eros lay, since that her feet, however she might roam, could never travel to the heavenly home of love beyond the bounds of mortal day. Yet she must come to him, and now 'twas proved how that to lovers, as is told in song, seeking the way no place is far removed, nor is there any obstacle so strong, nor bar so fixed that it can hinder them, and how to reach heaven's gate by stratagem vexed not the venturous heart of Psyche long. To face her enemy might well avail, wherefore to Cyprus' shrine her steps she bent, hoping the goddess in her hate might hale her body to the skies for punishment, whatever to be. Yet now her fiercest wrath seemed happiest fortune, seeing 'twas the path whereby alone unto her love she went. End of part 8, recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 9 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. Part 9, November. But Aphrodite to the house of Zeus being bound bade beckon out her milk-white steeds, 4 doves that ready to her royal use in golden cages stood and pecked the seeds, best of the nimble air's high-sailing folk, that wore with pride the marking of her yoke, and cooed in envy of her gentle needs. These drew in turn her chariot, when in state along the heaven with all her train she fared, and oft in journeying to the skiey gate of Zeus's palace high their flight had dared, which darkest vapour and thick glooms enshroud, above all else in the perpetual cloud, where through to mount again they stood prepared. Sleeking their feathers by her shining car, the same Hephaestos wrought for her when he, bruised in his hideous fall from heaven afar, was nursed by Thetis and Eurynome, the daughter of the ever refluent main, with whom he dwelt till he grew sound again, down in a hollow cave beside the sea. And them for kindness done was prompt to serve, forging them brooches rich in make and mode, earrings and supple chains of jointed curve, and other trinkets, while he there abode. And none of gods or men knew of his home, but they two only, and the salt sea foam to and fro past his cavern ever flowed. 'Twas then he wrought this work within the cave, embossed with rich design a mooned car, and when returned to heaven to Venus gave, in form imagined like her crescent star, which circling nearest earth maketh at night to wakeful mortal men shadow and light, alone of all the stars in heaven that are. 2 slender wheels it had, with fretted tires of biting adamant, to take firm hold of cloud or ether, and their whirling fires threw off the air in halo where they rolled. And either nave that round the axle turned a ruby was, whose steady crimson burned betwixt the twin-speed mingling fans of gold. Thereon the naked goddess mounting shook the reins, whereat the doves their wings outspread, and rising high their flight to heaven they took, and all the birds that in those courts were bred. Of her broad eaves that nested families, sparrows and swallows joined their companies, a while and twittered to her overhead. But onward she with fading tracks of flame sped swiftly till she reached her journey's end, and when within the house of Zeus she came, she prayed the Sire of Heaven that he would lend Hermes the Argos slayer for her hest, and he being granted her at her request, she went forthwith to seek him and to send. Who happed within the palace then to wait upon the almighty pleasure, and her tale was quickly told, and he made answer straight, that he would find the truant without fail, asking the goddess by what signs her slave might best be known, and what the price she gave for capture or admitted for the bail. All which he took his silver style to write in letters large upon a waxed board, her age and name, her colour, face and height, her home and parentage, and the reward, and then read over as 'twas to be proclaimed, and she took oath to give the price she named, without demur, when Psyche was restored. Then on his head he closely set his cap, with eared wings erect, and over his knee he crossed each foot in turn to prove the strap that bound his winged sandals, and shook free his chlamys, and got up, and in his hand, taking his fair white ribboned herald's wand, leapt forth on air, accoutred cap a pie, and piloting along the midday sky, held southward till the narrow map of Crete lay like a fleck in azure neath his eye, when down he came, and as an eagle fleet drops in some comb, then checks his headlong stoop, with wide flung wing wheeling and level swoop, to strike the bleating quarry with his feet. Thus he alighted, and in every town in all the isle before the close of day had carried the message which he carried down of Psyche, Aphrodite's runaway. But whosoever found the same and caught, and by such time unto her temple brought, to him the goddess would this guerdon pay. 6 honeyed kisses from her rosy mouth would Cytherea give, and one beside to quench at heart for aye love's mortal drouth, and unto him that hid her woe betide, which now was on all tongues, and Psyche's name herself overheard, or ever nigh she came to Aphrodite's temple, where she hied. When since she found her way to heaven was safe, she only wished to make it soon and sure, nor feared to meet the goddess in her chafe, so she herself surrender might secure, and not be given of other for the price. Nor was there any need of artifice, her once resplendent beauty to obscure. For now so changed she was by heavy woe, that for the little likeness that she bore to her description, she was feared to go within the fane, and when she stood before the priestess, scarce could she with oath persuade that she was Psyche, the renowned maid, whom men had left the temple to adore. But when to Hermes she was shown and given, he took no doubt, but eager to be quit, and proud of speed, returned with her to heaven, and left her with the proclamation writ, hung at her neck, the board with letters large, at Aphrodite's gate with those in charge, and up whence first he came, made haste to flit. But hapless Psyche fell, for so it chanced, to moody Cynethea's care, the one of Aphrodite's train, whom she advanced to try the work abandoned by her son, who by perpetual presence made ill end of good or bad, though she could both amend, and merit praise for work by her begun. But she to better thought her heart had shut, and proved she had a spite beyond compare, nor could the keenest taunts her anger glut, which she, when soured, was never wont to spare. And now she mocked at Psyche's shame and grief, as only she might do, and to her chief along the courtyard dragged her by the hair. Nor now was Aphrodite kinder grown, having her hated rival in her power. She laughed for joy, and in triumphant tone bade her a merry welcome to her bower. 'Tis fit indeed daughters-in-law should wait upon their mothers, but thou comest late. Psyche, I looked for thee before this hour. And yet, thus gave she rein to jeer and jibe, forgive me if I hold thee negligent, or if accustomed vanity ascribe an honour to myself that was not meant. Thy lover is it, who so dearly prized the pretty soul, then left her and despised. To him more like thy heavenward steps were bent. Nor without reason Zeus, I tell thee, swooned to hear the story of the drop of oil, the revelation and the ghastly wound. My merriment is but my fear's recoil. But if my son was unkind, thou shalt see how kind a goddess can his mother be, to bring thy tainted honour clear of soil. And so, to match her promise with her mirth, 2 of her ministers she called in ken, that work the melancholy of the earth. Merimna, that with care perplexes when the hearts of mortals have the gods forgot, and Lipe, that her sorrow spares them not, when mortals have forgot their fellow men. These like twin sharks that in a fair ship's wake swim constant, showing above the water blue their shearing fins and hasty ravin make of overthrow or offal, so these 2 on Aphrodite's passing follow hard, and now she offered to their gluts regard sweet Psyche with command their wont to do. But in what secret chamber their foul task these soul tormentors plied, or what their skill, pity of tender nature may not ask, nor poet stain his rhyme with such an ill, but they at last themselves turned from their rack, weary of cruelty, and led her back, saying that further torture were to kill. Then when the goddess saw her, more she mocked. Art thou the woman of the earth, she said, that hast in sorceries mine Eros locked, and stood thyself for worship in my stead, looking that I should pity thee or care for what illicit offspring thou mayst bear, or let thee to that god my son be wed? I know thy trick, and thou art one of them who steal love's favour in the gentle way, wearing submission for a diadem, patience and suffering for thy rich array. Thou wilt be modest, kind, implicit so, to rest thy wily spirit out of show, that it may leap the livelier into play. Devout at doing nothing, if so be the grace become thee well, but active yet, above all others be there none to see thy business and thine eager face a sweat. Lo, I will prove thy talent, thou mayst live, and all that thou desirest will I give, if thou perform the task which I shall set. She took her then aside, and bade her heed a heap of grains piled high upon the floor, millet and mustard, hemp and poppy seed, and fern-bloom's undistinguishable spore, all kinds of pulse, of grasses and of spice, clover and linseed, rape and corn and rice, dodder and sesame, and many more. Sort me these seeds, she said. It now is night. I will return at morning. If I find that thou hast separated all aright, each grain from other grain after its kind, and set them in unmingled heaps apart, then shall thy wish be granted to thine heart. Whereat she turned and closed the door behind. End of part 9. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 10 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges, Part 10, December. A single lamp there stood beside the heap, and shed thereon its mocking golden light, such as might tempt the weary eye to sleep, rather than prick the nerve of tasked sight. Yet Psyche, not to fail for lack of zeal, with good will sat her down to her ordeal, sorting the larger seeds as best she might. When lo! Upon the wall a shadow passed of doubtful shape across the chamber dim, moving with speed, and seeing nought that cast the shade, she bent her down the flame to trim, and there the beast itself, a little ant, climbed up in compass of the lustre scant, upon the bowl of oil ran round the rim. Smiling to see the creature of her fear so dwarfed by truth, she watched him where he crept, for mere distraction telling in his ear what straits she then was in, and telling wept. Whereat he stood and trimmed his horns, but ere her tale was done resumed his manner scare, ran down and on his way in darkness kept. But she intent drew forth with dexterous hand the larger seeds, or pushed the smaller back, or light from heavy with her breathing fanned, when suddenly she saw the floor grow black, and troops of ants, flowing in noiseless train, moved to the hill of seeds as over a plain armies approach a city for attack. And gathering on the grain began to strive with grappling horns, and each from out the heap his burden drew, and all their motion live struggled and slid upon the surface steep. And Psyche wondered, watching them, to find the creatures separated kind from kind, till dizzied with the sight she fell asleep. And when she woke, 'twas with the morning sound of Aphrodite's anger at the door, whom high amaze stayed backward as she found her foe asleep with all her trouble o'er. And round the room beheld, in order due, the piles arranged distinct and sorted true, grain with grain, seed with seed, and spore with spore. She fiercely cried, "Thou shalt not thus escape, for to this marvel darest thou not pretend. There is but one that could this order shape, Demeter, and I knew her not thy friend. Therefore another trial will I set, in which she cannot aid thee nor abet, but thou thyself must bring it fair to end." Thereon she sped her to the bounds of Thrace, and set her by a river deep and wide, and said, "To east beyond this stream a race of golden fleeced sheep at pasture bide. Go seek them out, and this thy task, to pull but one lock for me of their precious wool, and give it in my hands at eventide. This do, and thou shalt have thy heart's desire." Which said, she fled and left her by the stream. And Psyche then, with courage still entire, had plunged therein, but now of great esteem her life she rated, while it lent a spell wherein she yet might hope to quit her well, and in one winning all her woes redeem. Thereas she stood in doubt, a fluting voice rose from the flood: "Psyche, be not afraid to hear a reed give tongue, for 'twas of choice that I from mortal flesh a plant was made. My name is Syrinx. Once from mighty Pan into the drowning river as I ran, a fearful prayer my steps for ever stayed. But by that change in many climes I live, and Pan, my lover, who to me alone is true and does me honour, I forgive. Nor if I speak in sorrow is it my own. Rather for thee my voice I now uplift, to warn thee plunge not in the river swift, nor seek the golden sheep to men unknown. If thou should cross the stream, which may not be, thou couldst not climb upon the hanging rocks, nor ever, as the goddess bade thee, see the pasture of the yellow fleeced flocks. Or if thou could, their herded horns would gore, and slay thee on the crags, or thrust thee o'er, ere thou couldst rob them of their golden locks. The goddess means thy death, but I can show how thy obedience yet may thwart her will. At noon the golden flocks descend below, leaving the scented herbage of the hill, and where the shelving banks to shallows fall, drink the rippling water one and all, nor back return till they have drawn their fill. I will command a thorn bush, that it stoop over some ram that steppeth by in peace, and him in all its prickles firmly coop, making the seizure of his golden fleece. So without peril of his angry horns shalt thou be quit, for he upon the thorns must leave his ransom ere he win release." Then Psyche thanked her for her kind befriending, and hid among the rushes looking east. And when noon came she saw the flock descending out of the hills, and lo, one golden beast caught in a thorn bush, and the mighty brute struggled and tore it from its twisted root into the stream, or ever it was released. And when they watered were, and gone the breeze, floated the freighted thorn where Psyche lay, whence she unhooked the golden wool at ease, and back to heaven for passage swift gan pray. And Hermes, who was sent to be her guide, if so she lived, came down at eventide, and bore her thither ere the close of day. But when the goddess saw the locks of gold held to her hands, her heart with wrath overran. Most desperate thou, and by a betting bold, that dost outwit me, prove thee as I can. Yet this work is not thine, there is but one Of all the gods who could the thing have done. Hast thou a friend too in the lusty Pan? I'll give thee trial where he cannot aid. Which said, she led her to a torrid land, Level and black, but not with flood or shade. For nothing could the mighty heat withstand, Which aye from morn till eve the naked sun Pour'd on that plain where never foot had run, Nor any herb sprung on its molten sand. Far off a gloomy mountain rose alone, And Aphrodite thither pointing said, There lies thy task, out of the topmost stone Of yonder hill upwells a fountain head. Take thou this goblet, brimming must thou bring Its cup with water from that sacred spring, If ever to my son thou wouldst be wed. Saying, she gave into her hands a bowl, Cut of one crystal, open, broad, and fair, And bade her at all hazard keep it whole. For heaven held nought beside so fine or rare. Then was she gone, and Psyche on the plain Now doubted if she ever should regain The love of Eros, strove she howsoe'er. Yet as a helmsman at the word to tack Swiftly without a thought puts down his helm, So Psyche turn'd to tread that desert black. Since was no fear that could her heart overwhelm. Nor knew she that she went the fount to seek Of cold Cocytus, springing to the peak Secretly from his source in Pluto's realm. All night and day she journey'd, and at last Came to the rock, gazed up in vain around. Nothing she saw but precipices vast, Over ruined scarps with rugged ridges crown'd. And creeping to a cleft to rest in shade, Where'er the desperate venture she essay'd, She fell asleep upon the stony ground. A dream came to her thus. She stood alone Within her palace in the high ravine, Where nought but she was changed, but she to stone. Worshippers thronged the court, and still were seen Folk flying from the peak, who evermore, Flying and flying, lighted on the floor. Hail, cried they, wife of Eros, adored queen. A hurtling of the battled air disturbed Her sunken sense, and waked her eyes to meet The kingly bird of Zeus himself, that curb'd His swooping course, alighting at her feet. With gentle motion his far darting eye In kindness dimm'd upon her, he drew nigh, And thus in words unveil'd her foe's deceit. In vain, poor Psyche, hast thou hither striven Across the fiery plain, toiling so well. Cruelly to destruction art thou driven By her whose hate thou canst not quit nor quell. No mortal foot may scale this horrid mount, And those black waters of its topmost fount Are guarded by the horned snakes of hell. Its little rill is an unleaping jet Of cold Cocytus, which for ever licks earth's base. And when with Acheron 'tis met, Its waters with that other cannot mix, Which holds the elemental air dissolved, But with it in its ceaseless course revolved Issues unmingled in the lake of Styx. The souls of murderers in guise of fish Scream as they swim therein, and wail for cold Their times of woe, determined by the wish Of them they murder'd on the earth of old, Whom each 5 years they see, whenever they make Their passage to the Acusurian lake, And their release may win from pains condoled. For if the pitying ear of them they slew Be haply pierced by their voices spare, Then are they freed from pain, as are some few. But for the most again they forward fare To Tartarus obscene, and outcast thence Are hurried back into the cold intense, And with new company their torments share. Its biting lymph may not be touch'd of man Or god, unless the fates have so ordain'd. Nor could I in thy favour break the ban, Nor pass the dragons that thereby are chain'd, Didst thou not bear the sacred cup of Zeus, Which for thy peril lent shall turn to use, And truly do the service which it feign'd. Thus as he spake, his talons made he ring Around the crystal bowl, and soaring high Descended as from heaven upon the spring. Nor dared the horned snakes of hell deny The minister of Zeus that bore his cup, To fill it with their trusted water up, Thence to the King of Heaven therewith to fly. But he to Psyche bent his gracious speed, and bidding her to mount his feather'd back, bore her aloft as once young Ganymede, nor ever made his steady flight to slack, ere that he set her down beside her goal, and gave into her hands the crystal bowl, unspilled overbrimming with the water black. End of part 10, recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 11 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. Part 11. January. But Eros, now recovered from his hurt, felt other pangs. For who would not relent, weighing the small crime and unmatched desert of Psyche with her cruel punishment? And shamed he grew to be so near allied to her who by her taunts awoke his pride, as his compassion by her spite unspent. Which Aphrodite seeing waxed more firm, that he should never meet with Psyche more, and had in thought already set the term to their communion with that trial sore, which sent her forth upon a quest accurst, and not to be accomplished, that of thirst she there might perish on hell's torrid shore. And now it chanced that she had called her son into her presence chamber to unfold Psyche's destruction, that her fate might stun what love remained by duty uncontrolled. And he, to hide his tears' rebellious storm, was fled, when in his place another form rose 'neath the golden lintel, and behold, Psyche herself in slow and balanced strain, poising the crystal bowl with fearful heed, her eyes at watch upon the steadied plain, and whole soul gathered in the single deed. Onward she came, and stooping to the floor, set down the cup unspilled and brimming o'er at Aphrodite's feet, and rose up freed. Surprise overcame the goddess, and she too stood like a statue, but with passion pale, till when her victim nothing spake, she threw some kindness in her voice, and bade her hail. But in the smiling judge 'twas plain to see, saying, "What water bringest thou here to me, that justice over hate should not prevail?" Then Psyche said, "This is the biting flood of black Cocytus, silver'd with the gleam of souls that guilty of another's blood are pent therein, and as they swim they scream. The horned snakes of hell upon the mount enchained for ever guard the livid fount, and but the fates can grant to touch the stream." "Wherefore," the goddess cried, "'tis plain that none but one I wot of could this thing have wrought. That which another doth may well be done, nor thou the nearer to my promise brought. Thou buildest on a hope to be destroyed, if thou accept conditions and avoid thy parcel, nor thyself accomplish aught. Was it not kindness in me, being averse to all thy wish, to yield me thus to grant thy heart's desire, and nothing loath I worse, if thou wouldst only work as well as want? See, now I will not yet be all denial, but offer thee one last determining trial, and let it be a mutual covenant. This box," and in her hands she took a pyx, square cut of dark obsidian's rarest green, "take, and therewith beyond Tartarian Styx go thou, and entering Hades' house obscene, say to Persephone, if 'tis thy will to show me so much favour, prithee fill this little vase with beauty for love's queen." She begs but what shall well overlast a day, for of her own was much of late outspent, in nursing of her son in bed who lay, wounded by me, who for the gift am sent. Then bring me what she gives, and with all speed, for truth to say I stand, thou seest, in need of some such charm in my disparagement. If thou return to me with that acquist, having thyself the journey made, I swear that day to give thee whatsoever thou list. And be it my son, now, Psyche, wilt thou dare? And Psyche said, "If this thou truly mean, I will go down to Tartarus obscene, and beg of Hades' queen thy beauty there. Show me the way, but Aphrodite said, that mayst thou find, yet I will place thee whence a way there is, mortals have on it sped, ay, and returned thereby, so let us hence. Then swift to earth her willing prey she bore, and left her on the wide Laconian shore, alone at midnight in the darkness dense. 'Twas winter, and as shivering Psyche sat waiting for morn, she questioned in her mind what place the goddess meant, arrived whereat she might descend to hell, or how should find the way which gods to living men deny. No Orpheus, nay, nor Hercules am I, said she, to loosen where the great gods bind. And when at length the long delaying dawn broke on the peaks of huge Taygetus, and Psyche through the skirts of dark withdrawn looked on that promontory mountainous, and saw high crested Teleton in snow, her heart sank, and she wept with head bent low the malice of her foe dispiteous. And seeing near at hand an ancient tower, deserted now, but once a hold of men, she came thereto, and though 'twas all her power, mounted its steep unbroken stair again. Surely, she said, for now a second time she thought to die, this little height I climb will prove my shortest road to Pluto's den. Here must I come to Tartaros. Once there, turn as I may, and straight to death had sprung, when in the mossy tower the imprisoned air was shaken, and the hoary stones gave tongue. Stand firm, that rugged voice outcried, of such as choose despondency for guide. Hast thou not heard what bitterest fate is sung? Hearken, for I the road and means can teach, how thou mayst come to hell and yet escape. And first must thou, that upper gate to reach, along these sea-girt hills thy journey shape, to where the land in sea dips furthest south, at Taenarus and Hades' earthly mouth, hard by Poseidon's temple at the cape. Thereby may one descend, but they that make that passage down must go provided well. So take in either hand a honey cake, of pearled barley mixed and hydromel, and in thy mouth 2 doits, first having bound the pyx beneath thy robe enwrapped around. Thus set thou forth, and mark what more I tell. When thou hast gone alone some half thy road, thou wilt overtake a lame outwearied ass, and one that beats him tottering neath his load of logs, and beats in vain, will cry, Alas! Help me, kind friend, my faggots to adjust. But thou that silly cripple's words mistrust, 'tis planted for thy death, note it and pass. And when thy road the Stygian river joins, where woolly Charon ferries over the dead, he will demand his fare, one of thy coins, force with thy tongue between thy teeth thy head, offering instead of hand to give the doit. His fingers in this custom are adroit, and thine must not set down the barley bread. Then in his crazy bark, as ferrying over the stream thou sittest, one that seems to float rather than swim midway twixt shore and shore, will stretch his fleshless hand upon the boat, and beg thee of thy pity take him in. Shut thy soft ear unto his clamour thin, nor for a phantom deed thyself devote. Next, on the further bank, when thou art stept, 3 wizen'd women weaving at the woof will stop and pray thee in their art adept to free their tangled threads. Hold thou aloof, for this and other traps thy foe hath plann'd, to make thee drop the cakes from out thy hand, putting thy prudence to perpetual proof. For by 1 cake thou comest into hell, and by 1 cake departest, since the hound that guards the gate is ever pleased well to taste man's meal or sweetened grain unground. Cast him a cake, for that thou mayst go free, even to the mansion of Persephone, without more stay or peril, safe and sound. She will receive thee kindly, thou decline her courtesies, and make the floor thy seat, refusing what is offered, food or wine, save only beg a crust of bread to eat. Then tell thy mission, and her present take, which when thou hast set forth with pyx and cake, 1 in each hand, while yet thou mayst retreat. Giving thy second cake to Cerberus, the coin to Charon, and that way whereby thou camest following thou comest thus, to see again the starry choir on high, But guard thou well the pyx, nor once uplift the lid to look on Persephase's gift, else 'tis in vain I bid thee now not die." Then Psyche thanked the tower, and stooped her mouth to kiss the stones upon his rampart hoary, and coming down his stair went hasting south along the steep Tyrrhenian promontory, and found the cave and temple by the cape, and took the cakes and coins, and made escape beneath the earth according to his story. And overtook the ass, but lent no aid, and offered Charon with her teeth his fee, and passed the floating ghost in vain, who prayed, and turned her back upon the weavers three, and threw the honey cake to that hell hound, three-headed Cerberus, and safe and sound came to the mansion of Persephone. Kindly received, she courtesy declined, sat on the ground, ate not, save where she lay. A crust of bread revealed the goddess mind, the gift took, and returned upon her way. Gave Cerberus his cake, Charon his fare, and saw through hell's mouth to the purple air, and one by one the keen stars melt in day. A while from so long journeying in the shades, resting at Taenarus, she came to know how up the eastern coast some 40 stades there stood a temple of her goddess foe. There would she make her offering, there reclaim the prize which now 'twas happiness to name, the joy that should redeem all passed woe. And wending by the sunny shore at noon, she with her pyx, and wondering what it hid, of what kind, what the fashion of the boon could be that she to look on was forbid. Alas for innocence so hard to teach, at fancy's prick she sat her on the beach, and to content desire lifted the lid. She saw within nothing, but over her sight, that looked on nothing, gan a darkness creep. A cloudy poison, mixed of Stygian night, wrapped her to deadly and infernal sleep. Backward she fell, like one when all is over, and lay outstretched as lies upon the shore a drowned corpse cast up by the murmuring deep. End of part 11. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Part 12 of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com. Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. Part 12, February. While Eros in his chamber hid his tears, mourning the loss of Psyche and her fate, the rumour of her safety reached his ears, and how she came to Aphrodite's gate. Whereat with hope returned his hardihood, and secretly he purposed, while he could, himself to save her from the goddess hate. Then learning what he might, and guessing more, his ready wit came soon to understand the journey to the far Laconian shore, whither to fly and seek his love he planned, and making good escape in dark of night, ere the sun crossed his true meridian flight, he by Teuthrone struck the southern strand. There as it chanced he found that snowy bird of Crete that late made mischief with his queen, and now along the cliffs with wings unstirred sailed, and that morn had crossed the sea between, whom as he passed he hailed and questioned thus: "O snowy gull, if thou from Taenarus be come, say hast thou there my Psyche seen?" The gull replied: "Thy Psyche have I seen. Walking beside the sea she joyeth to bear a pyx of dark obsidian's rarest green, wherein she gazeth on her features fair. She is not hence by now 6 miles at most." Then Eros bade him speed, and down the coast held on his passage through the buoyant air. With eager eye he search'd the salty marge, boding all mischief from his mother's glee, and wondering of her wiles, and what the charge shut in the dark obsidian pyx might be. And lo, at last outstretched beside the rocks, Psyche as lifeless, and the open box laid with the weedy refuse of the sea. He guessed all, flew down, and beside her knelt, with both his hands stroking her temples wan, and for the poison with his fingers felt, and drew it gently from her, and anon she slowly from those Stygian fumes was freed, which he with magic handling and good heed replaced in pyx, and shut the lid thereon. O Psyche, thus, and kissing her, he cried, O simple-hearted Psyche, once again hast thou thy foolish longing gratified. A second time hath prying been thy bane. But lo, I love am come, for I am thine, nor ever more shall any fate malign, or spite of goddess smite our love in twain. Let now that I have saved thee twice outweigh the once that I deserted thee, and thou hast much obeyed for once to disobey, and wilt no more my bidding disallow. Take up thy pyx, to Aphrodite go, and claim the promise of thy mighty foe. May be that she will grant it to thee now. If she should yet refuse, despair not yet. Then Psyche, when she felt his arms restore their old embrace, and as their bodies met, knew the great joy that grief is pardoned for, and how it doth first ecstasy excel, when love well known, long lost and mourned well, in long days of no hope, comes home once more. But Eros, leaping up with purpose keen into the air as only love can fly, bore her to heaven, and setting her unseen at Aphrodite's golden gate, whereby they came as night was close on twilight dim, there left, and bidding her say nought of him, went onward to the house of Zeus most high, where winning audience of the heavenly sire, who well disposed to him was used to be, he told the story of his strong desire, and boldly begged that Zeus would grant his plea, that he might have sweet Psyche for his wife, and she be dowered with immortal life, since she was worthy by his firm decree. And great Zeus smiled, and at the smile of Zeus all heaven was glad, and on the earth below was calm and peace a while, and sorrow's truce. The sun shone forth and smote the winter snow. The flowers sprang, the birds gan sing and pair, and mortals, as they drew the brightened air, marvelled and quite forgot their common woe. Yet gave the Thunderer not his full consent without some words. At length is come the day, thus spake he, when for all thy youth misspent, thy mischief making and thy wanton play, thou art upgrown to taste the sweet and sour. Good shall it work upon thee from this hour. Look we for better things, and this I say, that since thy birth, which all we took for bliss, thou hast but mocked us, and no less on me hast brought disfavour and contempt, Uis, than others that have had to do with thee, till only such as vowed themselves aloof from thee and thine were held in good approof, and few there were who thus of shame went free. That punishment is shapen as reward is like thy fortune, but our good estate we honour while we sit to be adored. And thus 'twas written in the book of fate, not for thy pleasure but the general weal grant I the grace for which thou here dost kneel, and that which I determine shall not wait. So winged Hermes through the heaven he sped, to warn the high celestials to his hall, where they should Psyche see with Eros wed, and keep the day with feast ambrosial. And Hermes, flying through the skiey ways of high Olympus, spread sweet Psyche's praise, and bade the mighty gods obey his call. Then all the Cronian gods and goddesses assembled at his cry, and now 'twas known why Zeus had smiled, the lesser majesties attending them before his royal throne. Athena, mistress good of them that know, came, and Apollo, warder off of woe, who had to Psyche's sire her fate foreshown. Demeter, giver of the golden corn, fair Hebe, honoured at her Attic shrine, and Artemis with hunting spear and horn, and Dionysus, planter of the vine, with old Poseidon from the barren sea, and Leto and the lame Hephaestos, he himself who built those halls with skill divine. And ruddy Pan with many a quip and quirk aired 'mong those lofty gods his mirth ill-bred, bearing a mighty bowl of Cretan work. Stern Ares, with his crisp hair helmeted, came, and retired Hestia, and the god Hermes with winged cap and ribboned rod, by whom the company was heralded. And Hera sat by Zeus, and all around the Muses that of learning make their choice, who when Apollo struck his strings to sound, sang in alternate music with sweet voice, and righteous Themis and the Graces three, ushering the angered Aphrodite, she alone of all were there might not rejoice. But ere they sat to feast, Zeus bade them fill the cup ambrosial of immortal life, and said, "If Psyche drink, and 'tis my will, there is an end of this unhappy strife. Nor can the goddess, whose mislike had birth From too great honour paid the bride on earth, forbid her any more for Eros' wife." Then Aphrodite said, "So let it be." And Psyche was brought in with such a flush Of joy upon her face, as there to see Was fairer to love's eye than beauty's blush. And then she drank the eternal wine, whose draught Can terror cease, which flesh hath never quaffed, Nor doth it flow from grape that mortals crush. And next stood Eros forth, and took her hand, And kiss'd her happy face before them all. And Zeus proclaim'd them married, and outbann'd From heaven whoever should that word miscall. And then all sat to feast, and one by one Pledged Psyche ere they drank, and cried, "Well done!" And merry laughter rang throughout the hall. So thus was Eros unto Psyche wed, The heavenly bridegroom to his earthly bride, Who won his love in simple maidenhead. And by her love herself she glorified, And him from wanton wildness disinclined. Since in his love for her he came to find A joy unknown through all Olympus wide. And Psyche for her fall was quite forgiven, Since 'gainst herself, when tempted to rebel By others' malice, on her ruin driven, Only of sweet simplicity she fell. Wherein who fall may fall unto the skies. And being foolish, she was yet most wise, And took her trials patiently and well. And Aphrodite, since her full defeat, Is kinder and less jealous than before. And smiling on them both calls Psyche sweet, But thinks her son less manly than of yore. Though still she holds his arm of some renown, When he goes smiting mortals up and down, Piercing their marrow with his weapons sore. So now in steadfast love and happy state They hold for aye their mansion in the sky, And send down heavenly peace on those who mate In virgin love to find their joy thereby. Whom gently Eros shooteth, and apart Keepeth for them from all his sheaf that dart, Which Psyche in his chamber pick'd to try. Now in that same month Psyche bare a child, Who straight in heaven was named Hedone, In mortal tongues by other letters styled, Whom all to love, however named, agree. Whom in our noble English Joy we call, And honour them among us most of all, Whose happy children are as fair as she. Envoy! It is my prayer that she may smile on all Who read my tale as she hath smiled on me. End of Part 12. End of Eros and Psyche by Robert Bridges. Recorded by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com.